Good afternoon, everybody. I took my tags off. After being in the Navy 25 years and wearing my name on my chest, I just don't like tags on my name on it anymore. So I'm breaking a condition, I'm breaking a behavior, right? And so thank you all for having the opportunity to come here and speak with you today about something that's really near and dear to my heart, and that is human factors engineering. And so let me see how many people, can I see the hands of the people that work in cybersecurity? Leave them up. How many people have a human factors engineer on your team? How many of you have a psychologist on your team? A behavior analyst on your team? All right, the point of the reason I'm asking that question is because in the room today, we talked about behavior changes. But where's that expertise coming from? See, the changes we make in cybersecurity, in my opinion, are ad hoc at most because you don't have the people that really understand how to make behavior change in the room. No offense, I spent a lot of time as a cybersecurity professional, and we are Superman and Superwoman, I get it, we are. But at the end of the day, when you look around and we're talking about behavior change, that's a serious business, that's cost to the business. And most of us don't think about cost to the business. And so that's why I always ask this question, who's in the room? And another question I like to ask, some of you might have heard me ask it before, when we have a software engineering problem, who do we call? We call a software engineer. We got a networking problem, who do we call? If we got a cloud engineering problem, who do we call? When you got a problem with a human, who do you call? The point that I'm making is, when we're talking about eliminating human friction in an organization, where is your expertise? Think about that. Where's your expertise in the room? You can't take your way out of this problem. You cannot take your way out of human friction in your organization in cybersecurity. You can't. You can't put in enough security controls. You can't automate your way out of it. You can't AI your way out of it. You have to design. Where's she? Doc Work. We are right here. You're my best friend in the world now. I almost stood up and started clapping when you were talking. I really did, because it was like going to church when you were talking up here, because the point she made, I'm going to make some very similar points. The only way you can address the human element and the frictions and the challenges we have in cybersecurity, you have to design your way out of it intentionally. And so that's why I love human factors. That's why I love it. Anybody know what human factors started in? Well, if you're from the UK or Europe, you can't answer this. Where did it start? Because you all started a long way with you. It started in aviation. We were crashing planes. And look, as a former aviator, I understand it. We were crashing planes back in World War II. We had a saying back in World War II, said one a day in Tampa Bay, meaning that we was crashing a plane one a day in Tampa Bay. And then there was an experimental psychologist, that's the former name of human factors. He said, we're crashing planes because we can't tell the difference between the landing gear handle and the flaps. He fixed it. You know how he fixed it? He went and took a piece of a landing gear, cut it out, put it on the landing gear handle. Now the pilots could tell the difference between the two. And that's how we started with human factors in aviation. But how do we get to the trust part, right? This is some of the things we're going to talk about. How do we really get to the trust part? And I'll just go ahead and say this up front. If you want to get to the trust and the resilient part and human factors, you have to intentionally design for. You'll hear me say that constantly. What is human factors? Most people don't know. And most people don't know. And because when most studies talk about human factors, the first question that comes to my mind, what do you mean? What context are you talking about human factors? Are you talking about it from somebody like a human factors expert like myself who understands what it means? Or are you talking about it in the terms of behavior, something that we're trying to control? And so when we look at human factors, in my lens, when anybody say human factors, I'm thinking something scientific. I'm thinking we're going to look at it from a physical, a cognitive, and an organizational perspective. And most of the times I'm disappointed. So when we talk about it too, human factors really help us with error minimization. Let me say this up front. The fact that we reduce errors when we design it for human factors happens indirectly. The two things that we're really trying to achieve, we're trying to achieve behavior, getting the performance and the behavior we want through designing. In other words, human factors is about designing your environment to fit you, accounting for your limitations and your weaknesses. I love talking about the different organizations that practice human factors. Healthcare, space exploration, nuclear energy, industrial safety, aviation. Got it down to a science. But you're still going to have accidents. And ever since the accident in DC, I've been getting kind of pulled back in human factors and aviation. I want to stay over here in cybersecurity because we need the most help here. I really do. But we talk about it, again, we have to intentionally design for what we want. And that's challenging, folks. That's really challenging. When I worked in commercial aviation, the one thing I would tell you is that it's easy designing for pilots. Why? You train them to perform the way you want them. And then there's indicators on the airplane to tell you if a pilot is overflying the plane, underflying the plane, and off profile. And the last thing you want to do is go to the director of operations and explain why you were at 210 degrees below 10,000 feet. That's a violation. And so let's baseline human factors in cybersecurity. There's three things I want you to think of when you leave this room today about human factors. It's scientific. It is a discipline. And it's my profession. And this is missing in cybersecurity in most organizations. And what it really means is talk about how do we bring what we do to the table? How do we bring our expertise to the table? We listen to people. We study people. I sit and people watch all day because I study people for a living. When I go to a door, I pay attention to the signifiers on the door. Is it right? Because if it say push in and you pushing in, the door hits you in the face, it's wrong. So I look at stuff like that. I look at how we design things. When I get in my car, I can work my car right to left. I can work my car left to right. But now I have a problem because my screen is digital. Now I got to touch it. That's a bad design. We went to these digital screens. It really is a bad design. Human factors engineers are studying that today. Because you have to take your attention off the road to push something. When when mom and dad had the long Cadillac, you just turn the knob. It was different. Today, we are distracted. Our infotainment system is a major distraction to us. And how do we, and Julie, I'm going to give you a shout out here. Thank you, Julie, for doing your work around human-centered cybersecurity. You got us started in the right direction. We definitely needed that. So shout out to you and thank you and your team for what you do to get us started on the right direction with the NIST initiative around human-centered cybersecurity. We needed that. We needed that because now, when I teach this class out of Arizona State, I designed it and I teach it. My final project for my students coming up in the next couple of weeks, they're going to have to design and write a NIST publication on human-centered cybersecurity. Now, give me a year to get it right. Give me a year to get it right, and I give you the papers. I give you the papers. Yes. So I designed that just for you to see if that was possible. But seriously, though, the truth of the matter, when we start talking about human factors in cybersecurity, we did some research, and we looked at 100 papers. And there were 16 different definitions of human factors. Everybody was defining it differently. The way I define human factors is the way the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society define human factors. That is, basically, how do we design an environment that fits us? Most of the people don't acknowledge what it is in their research. That's a problem, but the title will say human factors. So I'm going home from work, excited I got a new paper to read, and there's not one thing in there about human factors. And this inconsistent terminology problem, to me, takes away from the issue that we really need to resolve around the human element in cybersecurity. We have a whole engineering discipline missing in cybersecurity. Anybody ever thought of it that way? Because remember the question I just asked you. HR is not going to fix your human factors problem. They're not. So this is a slide I really want us to get to. So we came up with these definitions, we pulled them out of the papers, and we weren't happy with what we saw. So we wanted to break them down. And so what you essentially see here is the different parts of the definitions. And as you can see, not one had a complete definition that aligned with the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society. You got one that came close, but the rest of them was halfway there. That's a major problem. The problem is now we have a lack of standardization on what human factors really mean. And here's the thing, I'm not upset. I accept the fact that people talk about human factors and it's not what I talk about, because it gives me the room to do more research to find out how do I classify what they're talking about. That's important too, because there's years, decades of research like that that's poorly defined, what I call poorly defined, but it's still important nonetheless, it's important. And so as a human factors engineer, if we look at the research, most of us we're on the outside looking in. And the reason I say that is because we're trying to understand what's going on in the cybersecurity space, and we can't get there. Most companies are not going to allow you to walk in and do any type of human factors assessment on their people. Zero. Anybody have that problem? I know I do. I do. And I tell them we can keep it private. I can sign an NDA. I just want to do the research. And people are, again, this is not new to cyber. This is just human factors altogether. It's a sensitive topic. So how do we operationalize it? And so this is what we do. We look at people. We study people. One of the studies we're doing right now, we're looking at chief information security officers and burnout. Why are we looking at chief information security officers first? They're the leaders. They're the leaders. And burnout is cascading. But I don't like to say burnout is cascading. And you're going to see here in a few minutes, I use another word. But what we do, we look at people, like task analysis, right? We don't do task analysis in cybersecurity. How many of you done task analysis in cybersecurity? How many of you say, here are my hardest jobs to do? So this person's only going to give me 8 units of work a week. Everybody else is going to give me 15 or 12 to 15. How many of us done that? See? Do we do this in aviation? We do this a lot in aviation. That's why in aviation we can say this. We got 2 critical phases of flight. What are they? Takeoff and landing. When you talk to a surgeon, he will tell you, he got critical phases along his way too. Right? Let's look at how we do human factors in space exploration. Do astronauts lose tools? No, they don't. No, they don't. They hardly ever lose a tool. Why? Because they're on them. They're chained to them. Next time you look at a spacewalk, look and see where their tools are. Their tools are chained to them so they don't lose them. That object going at 17,500 miles per hour in space will cause a damage to a spacecraft, major damage. That's why they chain them to them. It's one less thing the astronaut has to worry about. And I love astronauts, smart people, but they do amazing things because they have a huge human factors task force behind them. Everything they do is what? Checklist oriented, right? When I worked at anybody work at Wells Fargo? Oh, good. When I worked at Wells Fargo, I used to be so mad because we never wrote anything down. And the reason we didn't write anything down was just we had poor human factors practices. You write things down to make it simpler for people. Checklists. You become checklist oriented. When something happened, you run a checklist. When I was in the military, we had an F-16 that went down behind enemy lines. It was very easy. Run the checklist. Run the checklist. That's all you had to do. But why we don't do that in cybersecurity? Why we don't have checklists? Right? Again, this is a very simple human factors practices that we can do. We do design integration. How do we design for what we want? That's a major key. How do we design for what we want? And you don't design by yourself. You design, like she was talking about, like Doc said earlier, based on personas. You got to get everybody in the room and account for every persona when you design. Now you have less workaround. Because when you design and you allow people, and you don't design for the different personas or different groups in the room, people circumvent that, right? And so when you design based on personas, you get a better outcome. And then we evaluate our work. We don't evaluate our work in a silo. We evaluate our work on feedback. And then we start it all over again. It's a continuous process. It's never ending because companies are integrating technology all the time. Just like the researcher said at MIT, we live in a technologically led cycle, meaning we are constantly integrating technology. And because we're constantly integrating technology, we are constantly adding people to our ecosystem. We're constantly having to make changes. And so because these things are happening continuously, we also run the risk of having human degradation. And that leads to performance issues like human errors. And that's why this is important, is that you run this cycle continuously to prevent it from happening. It'll get to a point that the risk associated with this is palatable to the organizational risk, the risk appetite. If you're doing this for 5 years, I'll tell you this, if you're doing it for 2 years or more, something's wrong. Something's wrong. Here's the hardest problem right here. Human variability. The young lady was talking about her mom, her family. My mom almost got scammed 2 weeks ago. Luckily, my sister came home and walked in the house and hung up the phone from my mom. My mom's 74 years old, and somebody had her in a situation where she felt like she couldn't get off the phone. Then we had to retrain my mom, and that's why I put my mom on, what's the best computer to put your parents on, by the way? What's that? but besides none, what's the best one? Yep. Can't download anything, can't add anything to it. Yep. But seriously though, when we talk about human variability here, behavior is, looking at the different behaviors of people, how do we drive towards the behavior we want from different demographics? This is tough. This is not done, you can't do it in a silo. You have to understand what you're designing for. When I worked at Wells Fargo, this was tough. At the time when I worked for Wells Fargo, we had over 300,000 employees. And they couldn't spell human factors. Right? And so it was a very tough job to teach senior leaders how do you design for this. And then you got the emotional part. There's something called the visceral effect. Especially, it happens a lot during a cyber attack or during some type of scam or during some type of cyber incident where the attacker is putting time pressure on you, he's putting pressure to tell you can't get off the phone, or he or she's running some other type of scam on you to make you do something right there. They're putting you in visceral overload. When you get in visceral overload, you start to make poor decisions. Just like my mom was caught in that circle, she was afraid to put the phone down. She was in visceral overload. And this is one of the things we try to prevent people from being in visceral overload. And so here's some practices, human factors practices. There's a list of them that I love to use, but one of them I love to do, you saw this earlier. Look at that, minimizing cognitive load. Doc, we're right here. We're best friends now. We're best friends now. Somebody said it earlier, accessibility and inclusivity, right? Error prevention. Let me tell you about error prevention. We do not do enough with error prevention in cybersecurity. Because when we keep saying we're making errors, what kind of errors? That's James. I love James Reason. He's recently passed, one of my favorite seminal researchers to this field. He said there are several types of errors: skill-based, rules-based, knowledge-based. Then you have violations. What type of errors are you seeing in your organization? You have to classify them. If you don't classify your errors, you have no way of fixing them. And then again, codification. Write things down. Here's why you write things down. People come to work, and every last one of us has stressors in our life. My parents, being online, is a stressor for me. I swear it is. My dad gets up early in the morning before 6:30 and go get coffee. Why? Why can't he drink coffee at home? He's not going to work. He's retired. So we have that fight every time. I bought a coffee machine for him to try to control his behavior to make coffee at home. He doesn't make coffee, right? So I'm not going to win that. My dad, I got to accept my dad is going to get up at 6:30 and get out there with rush hour traffic and be in the way. That's my dad. But seriously, human performance issues in cybersecurity, this is just a short list of them. But when we talk about human performance issues in cybersecurity, this is a real issue, compounded by a shortage of cybersecurity talent and a tumultuous cyber threat environment that's hyperactive. Earlier Jason talked about burnout. Let me tell you, I'm trying to change the narrative around burnout. Burnout is at the end of the road. If you don't control your burnout, the ultimate is next for you. So let's change the narrative and say, let's stay to the left of the burnout boom. Let's talk about mitigating stress and fatigue so we never have to have discussion around burnout. When you look at the research around burnout, it's all on burnout and what happens next. There is not enough research on how to prevent burnout, how to deal with the stress and how to deal with the fatigue to make it more manageable to prevent burnout. Anybody know how long it takes to recover from burnout? Anybody want to guess?
6 months.
Close. 3 to 4 months, depending on the individual, totally unplugged from work. You're not in a work environment. If you come back before that, the burnout will onset again. You have to go through the treatment to recover from burnout. And here's the thing I tell cybersecurity professionals: do not diagnose yourself with burnout. Go to a physician and get it officially done and get it and make it part of your health treatment plan. That way your employer knows it's a serious ordeal. And that way you are covered and able to keep your job. And so human performance issues in cybersecurity are real. The other one is distraction that I didn't put up here, and another one is lack of prioritization. That's my other favorite one from managers. You have to prioritize for your people. And so how do we build trust in here? Through human-centered cybersecurity. That's one of my favorite ones. Thank you, Julie. Another one is through human-centered AI, because AI is coming, right? Another one through is continuous adaptation. You have to, didn't like that slide there. We have to continuously build to make this perfect. And it's never going to get perfect, but to get to a point to where we can accept it. We can't stop building and making this process work. And that's how we get the trust and resiliency we want. We allow the people to have a voice in what we're designing and what we're putting together. When you design for the people without the people, let me tell you, it doesn't work that way. My car was designed with me with my intent in mind. Your car was designed the same way. Anybody ever get in that car and open the door and try to put it in drive these days? Yeah, I tried that. The car's not going anywhere. There's a feature in there that will stop the car. Don't go try it. I've already tried it. I'm telling you, that's what's going to happen. And accounting for the end user is so important. And so I love using this because, when I was a former aviator, the cockpit was designed for us. Everything we knew in there, we could work it with blindfolds on, it was designed for us. But how do we bring that same concept to cybersecurity when you have such large enterprise with such large amounts of people? This is the fight that we have to help figure out. How do we help industries figure this out in cybersecurity? This is where we need more people researching about this and cybersecurity. I'm going to be honest with you. A lot of the research around the human element in cybersecurity is disjointed. Julie, we need your help developing a research strategy around human factors. And then I'm going to task myself as the Human Factors Ergonomic Society Cyber Technical Group Chair. I'm going to work with Julie and I'm going to work with Matt to come up with a strategy for us to do more a research strategy around the human element in cybersecurity. Because the strategy is broken. A lot of people are doing research for the sake of strategy. We shouldn't, for the sake of research. We should be doing research to help solve industry problems. Look at that, I got ahead of myself, look at that. But anyway, error management, there's a science to this, and it matters. If you ask any other social-technical field, like aviation, healthcare, nuclear power, how do they classify their errors? They'll be able to spit this off to you like it's just common practice, because it is. And how do we address behavior change? We have to look at some of these factors, analysis. We have to look at the motivation, the ability to make things easier for people, triggers, and then reinforcing that. Each one of us have a trigger to make us do something wrong. Every last one of us. Like when I get a phishing email at work, I notoriously click on it. That's letting my security team know I need something harder. You didn't get me today. And then I call them and tell them I clicked on it. But I'm an ally to them, though. I'm a partner. I'm helping them get more money. And then we talked about the work task analysis piece. And then we talked about the conundrum of studies. The confidential constraints are real. I'm working with a group of CISOs right now. We did sign an NDA with them, but they have such a small number of cybersecurity professionals in the organization. But nonetheless, they want everything confidential. The problem with that, how do we get that out into the audience, right, to the greater audience? Methodological challenges. Human factors practitioners are some of the worst. They want you to put people in this true environment, the true state they will be in. How do you put somebody in an overloaded state during a research project in cybersecurity? That would take a lot of time. You know, we're still working through this. How do you capture that? And then how do you control the environments when you do the research? And that's a flaw. That's our very own flaw as human factors practitioners. And then we need more support from academic and industry. The one thing I would tell you, the last thing I would say before I close out here, is that we looked at some programs back in 2022. We wanted to know what schools are teaching human factors. And we didn't really want to know what schools particularly. We wanted to know how many schools in the United States were teaching a human factors course at the undergraduate level and at the graduate level. So there's no better place to go than the NSA, DHHS, Academic Centers of Excellence in Cybersecurity Defense. So we pulled the list, and then we went through every school, went through every of their curriculum. So long story short, undergraduate, there was 327 schools, 11 total course in human factors, or something related, human aspects in cybersecurity. When we looked at the graduate courses, the graduate programs, there was 227, and there was about 7 that total course. The question that I have for those of you that are in academia, what are we going to do about that? This is an industry problem. This is a problem in industry. This is a problem in government, and we're watching it. We are admiring this problem. So when I first got to UMGC, one of my program directors running, she said, I heard you're a human factors expert. We got a human factors course. Great, send me the syllabus. And I emailed her back, hey, we need to talk. I said, I got good news and I got bad news. She said, well, can we start with the bad news? I said, this is a security awareness course. We're no longer going to be teaching this course. We're not going to pay people to teach them security awareness. She said, then what's the bad? She said, well, then what's the good news? I'm here. So we completely redesigned the course, and now the students get a thorough immersion in human factors. So I'm doing my part. So I need every other school, every other academic in here to make sure your school is teaching human factors in cybersecurity or something related, because this is a huge problem in the industry and government, and they can't fix it by themselves. And let's see, we talked about some of that. Challenges in explainable AI, again, a lot of people hit on this earlier. I know, Doc, you did, thank you. This is a real problem for us right here. So I'm beginning to run all my presentations together. This is my 4th presentation in 6 days. So I'm gonna go ahead and close this out because I know got some questions to answer, right? So, man, you always on me, Ely. Between her and Jason, man, I'm telling you, man, they whipped me into shape. Well, this is my key takeaways here, and I go ahead and open the floor for questions. But I love y'all, though. Yes.
Yeah, quick question. I noticed that the human engineering model is really familiar to learning, right?
Yep.
Ed, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Development,
Yep.
So in your field, right? So in designing something for you, you also have to.
Yeah. Thank you. Absolutely. This is not rocket scientist, because I'm not a rocket scientist. I think I am at times, but I'm not. But this is really very simple. But it takes a lot of courage for organizations to want to adopt this, because it's time consuming and it's costly. Human factors practitioners are not cheap. Yes, sir.
You started out talking about, you asked a question like, how many people have a psychologist?
Right.
And you alluded to the psychological aspect, and talk about burnout.
Right.
I'm wondering about how deep we can go with the link between the human factors of cybersecurity and mental health. But then I actually started thinking about even beyond mental health, but like mental state.
Yes.
I never thought of this, but if I'm going to do truly adaptive human factor cybersecurity, I might want to also do a baseline of personalities across the organization and understand how many people I have that just tend to be very compliant and they give in to an extortion attempt or to the, what do you call it, the state they get put into.
The visceral effect?
The visceral effect.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I would want to understand that kind of have a heat map, so I really do understand what I need to change in my strategy. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense, because I love what you're saying. Because one of the things that I say is that security awareness don't go far enough. Security awareness will also teach us psychologically who we are and to help us identify what our weaknesses are. Right? And then the other thing about the mental health, the researchers in the UK already got you beat. They have already got groups meeting together talking about mental health and from a human factor perspective in cybersecurity. And this is why I love the researchers over in the UK. Did Jason get me? No. But seriously though, they are ahead of us by 10 years when it comes to human factors and cyber psychology and looking at mental health and stuff around the human element in cybersecurity. They have consistently been ahead of us. And they do a good job. They have a lot of venues, a lot of podcasts, just a lot of different things where they bring experts together and have these type of discussions. And in fact, I listen to them. And Jason, I was listening to your talk this morning, and you was talking about people scamming. There was a podcast called Smashing Technologies that just did a show on who moves the money from the scammers. Like they was just talking about the mules. Who moved the money? They was like, if you follow the money, then you get to break the larger organization up. So when I just heard your podcast, your talk this morning, that's the first thing that comes to my mind is follow the money. Yes, sir.
Yeah, hi. My name is Steve Lane. I'm with a company called Red Vector, and we do software that does human risk analysis. So I deal with a lot of CISOs. Share a little quick story here and get your perspective on it. I don't know if it's the good news, the bad news. To me, it's a bit of the problem. I go to one particular CISO of a Fortune 250 company, big operation, big deal. I'm like, why is it for every $10 million of budget you get to run this mission, the people over here dealing with the human risk part only get $1 million? Because first of all, you're wrong. $20 million, not $10 million. Because it's simple. Because the board wants to only invest in protecting what they own. Mm-hmm. We own the data. We own the IT systems. We don't own the people. We just rent them. Like, whoa,
right.
That's pretty cool. We're never going to close that. That's why I can't do it by name, but I'm going to use the story to talk about this, divide between cyber and the CISOs and the technical-minded signals, right? Where, I deal with a lot of CISOs that are proud. I can tell you exactly who stole that data. Oh, we know exactly who ransomed us. Well, man, the horse is going to lay at the barn. Let's have that coffee, right? Can you tell me about anything that you prevented by mitigating a situation, by taking a disgruntled person 6 months in advance and getting them some help? Oh, no, we don't deal with people. Well, why would I want to deal with the human signals? No, I just want to deal with technical signals. Yeah. I got to look at email and firewall logs and SIMs. Don't tell me about people.
So, sir, 2 points I made. Not in this presentation, but in my other presentations, I talk about making human risk assessment a part of your security risk assessment. Because we look at the organization from a security perspective, but we never add the human risk assessment piece into the security assessment. So that's something that is going to take retraining the industry to do. And the second part here is going to be kind of controversial. This is something Oz and I go back and forth on all the time, and that is, I'm about to answer your question though. So we don't want to call the human the weakest link in cybersecurity. We are very sensitive about that. How many of you believe that? We're very sensitive about it. We're overly sensitive about it. And I'll tell you why. because it's not something you run around telling people. You don't do that. But I do believe that it's okay for a CISO to say that my people are vulnerable. Either one of us can be vulnerable at any given time. Any given time. We need to change the narrative on that and say securing the human variability makes us will make us less vulnerable. So I need budget for that. As long as they're saying people are not the weakest link, they're never going to get budget for that. So we need to change the narrative. But it's not something we need to post on the neon sign telling people that they're the weakest link, because people, when you tell them that, they believe that. And so, but I do believe it's okay for leadership to have some confidential ways of talking and collaborating with each other to talk about human variability in the organization so they can get budget for it. But I agree with you.
I think one of the things, Calvin, you touched on quite a lot, and quite consistently, is language, use of language.
Yes.
You just gave a really good example there as well. Humans are the weakest link versus people are vulnerable.
Right.
And I can see a lot of people in the room nodding who very firmly believe that people are not the weakest link, but very firmly nodding that they recognize that humans are vulnerable. So
right.
Language is important. You also talked about human factors and the fact that as a community we often talk and use the term human factors, but we don't really mean necessarily human factors experts and people within the human factors discipline. So how do we get over this language challenge? Because this language challenge, if you think about security, these are in part the very challenge that prevents them confronting us. They believe they are confronting us. They believe that they are concerned and care about the human aspect. But we can see that there's a gap. How do we get over that? So
you and I had a conversation on LinkedIn about 8 months ago. And remember what we talked about? We talked about working with Julie to have a niche publication around human factors, human-centeredness, and cybersecurity. And Julie, we believe that a niche publication around this could help us standardize the language. You remember that conversation we had? You remember that conversation? No. I'm not putting her on the spot. I got.
It's on the to-do list. So we're gonna.
Right.
Yeah, it's on the to-do.
I got my students. We're using my students as test beds. Can I get over the IRB for that? But I'm using my students as test beds to help write this publication. So give us next semester. I send everything to you, and you just see what they. I take the names and stuff off of you. Yeah.
The point Steve just made that in essence, the very people who ultimately decide the direction the programs go in, they are focused on a number of things, and the truth is that this isn't always.
Yeah, so in my dissertation, I discovered that there was a knowledge gap with chief information security officers and senior executives. There's a knowledge gap. And it's no fault of their own. It's just that happens that when we train CISOs, they came up, so a lot of them came up through the ranks. But when you look at it from an education perspective, a certification perspective, especially the degree programs, we don't teach this. So they don't know it. No certification program is going to teach this. So again, we have some education to do. So.
And on that note, let's thank the speakers.